Hello and welcome to Solent Weekend News, live all across the Solent. Thank you for joining us. TV star and naturalist Chris Packham has joined campaigners fighting to save Southampton's libraries. The presenter of BBC's Spring Watch has visited Cobbett Road Library, which is facing closure under council budget cuts. Chris, who used the library as a child, says he wouldn't be where he is now had it not been for regular visits to read about wildlife. Solent Weekend News brings you this exclusive interview with Chris Packham.
I've come along to Cobbett Road Library in Southampton to give a little talk tonight about wildlife, basically. But the reason is that we hope to draw a few people in to show that the library is greater than the sum of its parts, and this is just the sort of event that people could take advantage of, and do take advantage of in contemporary libraries. I came to this library as a kid. I came in this evening, it was like going back in time. And it's great, and I remember sitting just here. Actually, there was a table at the other side there, and I remember sitting down there and reading a book about snakes when I must have been about 8 years old, and that was a very important time. I mean, my parents bought me a few books, but they didn't have an unlimited budget, so going to the library was something that we did every Saturday afternoon, and continue to do up until I was about 16 years old, and then I spent all my own pocket money on books, and now I'm fortunate enough to own a library, not quite as voluminous as this one, but nevertheless full of the things that I've read over the years. I think that as a source of learning, they're unparalleled, and historically they've been incredibly important in the UK. But they're much greater than a source of learning now. This isn't just a repository of books, it's a centre of community focus, and people come here for all sorts of things. There are DVDs, there are films, next door there's the kids section, they're full of computers and access to the internet, which perhaps some people don't have access to in their homes, so they can come here. And libraries orchestrate events for that community too, for any minority interest groups or even major interest groups in that community. So I see them as being very valuable, and the idea of closing them down is pretty abhorrent as far as I can make out. We live in an age where we have to make cuts. We know that there's a recession on, and we know that the council in this instance has to tighten its purse strings. They're not getting money from government. They can't raise it from our parking charges, which somewhat surprises me because they're exorbitant, as much as the idea of closing this library is abhorrent. But nevertheless, we've got to be realistic about that. Volunteers play a significant role in library running these days, but I still think you need a core central staff who know what's going on and who are supported by the council. And as much as we can draft volunteers in to help and to run many of the schemes, you know, behind the scenes, funding these sorts of things needs to be done properly, and it has a true value, and that value is ongoing. And so I think more than anything, I'm here to support this library and those others across Southampton which are currently threatened with closure. I don't think we should close them. I don't think we should sell off the city's art collection. Not every idea our council comes up with is a good one. And we live in a democracy, so we're just being democratic. We are peaceably and verbally opposing the closure of this and other libraries in Southampton.
And just going back to what you said about the library in your childhood, how did that help shape who you are today?
Without this library and Portswood Library, which I also visited, I wouldn't be sat here having this conversation with you. I mean, you know, I exhausted those libraries of books on natural history between the ages of 5 and 16, and I remember taking a book out once from one of those libraries and looking at all of the dates that were stamped into the front of it, and about 60% of them were loaned to me. And eventually my mother happened to be in Portswood many years ago, and as you know, the library sells off books from time to time, those which are out of date and have been replaced, and she bought me a book, and she brought it home and said, I've bought this in the library, it's like the one you used to read. And I said, no Mum, it's not like the one I used to read, it is the one I used to read. And when I looked and I could count through, you know, all through the 60s and 70s, and all those stamps were still in the book, and those were the times that I read it. And I read that book from cover to cover, and as I speak to you now, I can see the pictures in the book, and I can remember what was written in that book. And that has had a profound effect on my ability to understand the natural world. It was a book about snakes, actually, Appleby's British Snakes. And I still have it at home, it's a bit of a treasure. So, for me, the library was a font of knowledge that I wanted to acquire. and I would go in there and I'd borrow the books, and then as a child, I aspired to have, we had like sort of a salmon pink colour ticket. The children's tickets were salmon pink, and the adults were yellow. And I was so excited about getting my adult tickets, my yellow tickets. I had 3 tickets. You could apply in those days. You were given 2, and then you could apply for an extra one. And I had 3 library tickets, and I used them every single week. And I read all of those books. And when I'd exhausted the natural history section, I moved on to the human history section. And I remember reading about battles of Agincourt, Crécy, Waterloo, Trafalgar, all of those inaugural things I read from the adult book section in this library and in Portsmouth Library. And I can tell you, all about the Battle of Crécy in 1346 and Agincourt in 1415 and what happened at Waterloo. And that's down to the libraries in this city. And it's played, as I say, a significant role in my upbringing. It was a very formative thing. But I mean, that was then. That was the 60s and 70s. Libraries. If I was a contemporary kid in here, I'd be reading the graphic novels over there. I'd be, looking at the DVDs, Avatar, and everything else that's here. Alien versus Predator. I've seen that film plenty of times. I'd be doing that. And if I were an adult, a younger adult, I might be partaking in some sort of group activity here. That wasn't done then, but it is done now. Libraries have moved with the times. They need to continue to move with the times, and therefore they need support.
And is there any action that you're specifically taking? Are you writing to anyone? Are you planning anything?
I've spoken to the local press, and I've signed a petition on behalf of this library, and I've come along tonight to give my talk. And I have actually, there are national campaigns to retain libraries, and I'm a signatory to those as well. And I tweet and use social media to promote their causes, and I will continue to do so. I think it will be a tragedy if we lose our libraries, because they do represent so much. And do you know what? I came in the door this evening and I stepped into this room, and first of all I was slowly overwhelmed by the fact that I was in this space which I hadn't been in for some considerable years, and it took me about 30 seconds to find 2 books that I immediately wanted to see, and a DVD about the artist Gustav Klimt, which is just here. And I thought to myself, I'm really keen on the work of Gustav Klimt, and I don't know much about him as an artist at all. I wish I had time to hire this DVD. That's how long, 30 seconds from coming in there, and I had a thirst for more from this library, and that would be the same as anyone else who comes in.
Southampton Council is unable to provide anyone for interview, but the authority says in a statement, growing demand for online library services, the changing needs of local people and continuing pressure on public finances mean that Southampton's library service needs to change. The libraries which would no longer be managed by the council are the Millbrook, Burgess Road, Cobbett Road, Thornhill and Weston libraries. However, it is hoped that community organisations will come forward to provide a service from the buildings. The mobile library service would cease.